Helo, croeso pawb I podlediad Urdd Ynys Môn. Welcome everybody to the January edition of the Anglesey Druid Orders podcast. I am here in the glorious town of Beaumaris in the southeastern corner of Anglesey, where we are hosting our Mari, Lwyd and Hen Galan event, which is the Welsh Old New Year. And currently, there's a load of kids doing a mini Mari Lwyd making workshop. So if you do happen to see somebody walking by or some noises in the background, that is why, that's what's going on. So you're very, very welcome here. And I'm joined this month by the fabulous Kristal Jenks. You all right, Kristal?
Yes, very well, thank you. Good afternoon.
We were gonna pretend that this was your winter abode.
Oh yes, this is a little holiday home that I have in Beaumaris. Do excuse it, it's a bit shabby, isn't it, really? It's a bit small as well.
We're in the glorious surroundings of the Bulkley Hotel in Beaumaris. You can go online and find more information about this beautiful historic hotel. Just Google Bulkley Hotel Beaumaris. Now then, we've known each other a long time now.
Yeah.
It's like over 20 years.
Yeah, at least 20 years.
Must be 20 years. So I remember, oh my word, going back all those decades now, I think that we first met at Druid Camp.
Yes, we did.
Was
Indeed.
it Druid Camp by Rainbow 2000, right?
It was Rainbow 2000 Druid Camp.
And that was in, oh my word, it was in Mitchell Troy. Was it that one? The one with the gorgeous river and the weir.
Oh yes, the one with the river that we all went swimming in with the
Yeah.
kingfishers.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the little grove at the top of the hill,
Yes.
which was quite stunning.
And I think it was it 2003, 2004? Something,
Yeah, something like
gosh,
that.
it is over 20 years.
It is, it's a long time. It is a long time. So Kristal is one of the officers of the Anglesey Druid Order. She's there in the background doing all sorts of fun. Well, not always in the background either. You're very often up on a stage. Ah. You're not shy. You've never been one to be shy.
I'm not shy. No, I'm not a shy
No.
person.
So what was how did your journey into this whole world begin all those years ago? Because it must have started before I met you in 2003.
Yes. So my journey towards paganism and Druidry, I think, started when I was quite young. I was brought up in a small village in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by salt marshes, and had a lovely childhood, puddling around in mud and swimming in the sea and catching crabs and saying hello to them and putting them back in the sea and all that kind of thing, really, climbing trees. And I did go to Sunday school and to church and went to a Church of England school, like most people in this country do tend to as children. And I think my real awakening was when I had a pet rat called Reggie, beautiful rat. He used to come everywhere with me, used to ride on my shoulder and come on adventures with me. And when I tried to take him into Sunday school, I was told, no, you can't take him into Sunday school.
Oh, why?
I said, why? And I was told that apparently animals aren't allowed in church because they don't have souls.
Oh, that did
I
it.
said, didn't God make Reggie the same as he made me? And they said, well, no, because humans are, God's children. Animals are there to serve us. They don't have souls and they don't go to heaven. And I think for me, that was my big awakening into, hang on, that doesn't make any sense. How could this gorgeous little creature that's so loving and so kind not be as worthy as any other being? And from then onwards, I think I lost my love for that sort of patriarchal monotheistic religion that puts humans at the center of everything.
Yeah.
And somehow tells us that the world is here to serve us, and it just started to unpick that and think none of this seems to make a lot of sense to me.
But that's quite remarkable for a young person, though, to even consider or have the thought that, hold on a second, the whole world can't be anthropocentric. There's got to be more to it. That's some forward thinking for a young. Were you young?
I was quite young. I must have been 10 or 11, I think, at the time.
Yeah.
And yeah, from then onwards, I mean, I was lucky. My parents knew some slightly weird fringe people, so I got to know some of the people of their acquaintance, including some lovely witches. who were adults but were very accommodating and very kind in
Yeah.
sharing some of their thoughts with me. And one of them actually became a pen pal for a little while. She used to write letters backwards and forwards, which is
Oh,
a lovely thing for an adult woman to do with a little tween and early teen
yeah.
baby witch who kind of it's probably very boring really for them, but you know,
Yeah.
she was really supportive and kind. And I started reading obviously more about paganism and witchcraft. So I think I was around sort of 12, 13 when I really felt myself to definitely be a pagan and a
Yeah.
witch, and follow the path from there. And then it was early adulthood, I think, just meeting more people, going to camps and events and meeting people and reading. And I discovered Druidry. And for me, it was a huge awakening. And I was actually quite pissed off because I'd always been fascinated by mythology. And at school, they taught us about Greek mythology and Roman mythology and Norse mythology. And I loved reading all these stories about gods. And it wasn't until I was in my sort of mid to late teens that I actually realised we had British mythology
Mm.
and we had British gods and British heroes and British stories that were about the land that we lived in and the land under our feet. And I was really pissed off. I thought, why would they teach me about every other pantheon of gods and every other
Not our own.
stories and not our own?
Yeah.
And that was my introduction to Druidry.
Yeah. Through the myth.
Through the myth,
stories.
absolutely. The stories and
Yeah.
the myths, and realizing these stories are about my land
Mm.
and my people, and they've been withheld from me.
Yeah.
And I think it's very different. I know I've heard you talk about, you know, growing up in Wales, you're taught these stories, and it's very much part of your upbringing.
Yes. Yes.
Welsh
very much
culture is
was.
taught to
Yeah.
children from a very young age and is very important.
Yeah.
And you know, in England, that's been taken away from us. I feel that's very much something, you know, the flip side of, you know, the English trying to control the Welsh language and the Welsh culture is that it's also been taken away from us.
Yeah, it's been kind of lost, hasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's been nice to see of late. I have seen some movement, some noises of people trying to bring them back
Yes.
as well. You know, because England is rich in mythology,
Oh my
rich in folklore.
goodness,
These islands,
absolutely.
they're like riddled with
Yes.
it all. But when I was a kid, we were taught the Mabinogion, the four branches of the Mabinogi. But as a kid, I was always quite compelled by them, not just because the stories were really good or the storytellers were excellent, but for some reason, to me, they always sounded as if these were stories about real people. They were real people, but in my mind as a child, they were real people that still existed. So I used to play with them in the woods at the back of my grandmother's house, and felt that they were my imaginary friends, my real life friends, even though I couldn't see them. So even to say that they were imaginary is probably a bit of an oxymoron because they felt very real. And they spoke to me in a way that was different to just hearing them from a storyteller, but like playing with them. I felt as if I was developing relationships with these beings, these characters from a very early age. And that's never left me. And what I love about the stories, particularly when they're given to children or told to children, is that I think it's vitally important, even as adults, that we never forget that innocence, that sense of the magical and the wondrous and the enchanting that
Absolutely.
myth can convey and can relay. But did you not have what kind of storytelling were you particularly into when you were a child? I had this steep love, not just for the myths of Wales, but also for magical stories in general, actually. And I think my favourites were The Magic Faraway Tree and The Enchanted Wood by Enid Blyton. And I don't think that Enid Blyton was a particularly nice person either, apparently, from what I hear.
Apparently not.
But
Which is
I loved her books. And then of late, Jacqueline Wilson, who's a very popular British children's writer, she's been rewriting them.
oh, amazing.
Yeah, so I've literally just read The Magic Faraway Tree, A Christmas Adventure.
And is it good?
It's fabulous.
Okay,
I loved it.
in which case I will feel safe knowing that you've had it. So yes, I likewise grew up with Enid Blyton and immersed in the world of the Enchanted Wood and the Magic Faraway Tree. And that magic has never left me. I think as a child playing in the woods and climbing trees, it was always in the back of my mind. And children naturally, I think, accept that the world is a magical place and that
Yeah.
there's an otherness to it and there's more to the world around us than we can see and hear with
Yeah.
our everyday eyes and ears. And that's something that sadly we lose as adults. But nowadays, I still turn to Enid Blyton if I'm feeling a bit sad or a bit scared. If I've watched a scary film, I'll read a few chapters of The Magic Faraway Tree sometimes.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Why not?
and it
Why
just
not?
takes me back to the magic. But I've always been a very avid reader, and as a child, it was particularly Enid Blyton, and then as I got a little bit older, Tolkien. It was The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, and they were my friends really when I played in the woods with my sister as a
Yeah.
child, or when I paddled in the mud in the marshes. You know, we were in Middle Earth having adventures,
Yeah.
um, and again, that's also never left me. And what I love is, as an adult, and the more I've learned, that Tolkien was inspired by all of the mythology of the British, the Norse, all of the different sort of mythologies and stories and languages.
Mm.
He was such a lover of story, and he's woven all that into his fantasy books in a way that, has made
Yeah.
them very real to so many
Oh gosh, yeah.
people.
Because wasn't there a claim that he used the Celtic languages to create, was it Elfish?
Absolutely, yes. The Elvish languages were actually based quite a lot on Welsh.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
He
which
spent
is
a lot of
amazing.
time here as well, didn't he?
Yes,
He
he
spent a lot of
did.
time on the Llyn Peninsula, I think.
Yeah.
Why do you think, as I often think that, I don't know, maybe there's a tendency when we grow up and we move into magical practice as a lifestyle, as a life choice and a spiritual journey, I sometimes do find, particularly with social media, that there is a tendency sometimes for people to be awfully serious,
Oh, yeah.
awfully serious. And whilst I very much am a person who appreciates profundity and the mysteries, I also think sometimes that going back to those stories that inspired us when we were children is really important, actually. That an element of us continues to not grasp onto, but to retain and hold on to the innocence that those stories evoked, and the love of the magical, of the numinous.
I would say that's incredibly important and a huge part of my own personal practice. As you say, there's lots of people out there being very serious and very important. But to me, what is part of the magic of Druidry is that we don't close ourselves off from other things, from that other world and those other beings that are just out of sight or just out of hearing. And, one way to hold on to that magic is to remember the stories.
Mm.
And what I do when I go out in the woods, if I want to just go and spend a little bit of time in nature, rather than in terms of meditative practice, rather than sit somewhere quiet and meditate, my way to do it is to go on an adventure.
Yeah.
I channel my inner Bilbo Baggins, and
Yeah.
I put on my hat and my cloak and I go out of the door and I go into the woods and I look for adventure.
Yeah.
And actually just going out there with that childlike innocence and wonder and anticipation of adventure, it kind of brings home that, the world is giving you signs and telling you things all the time if you just have the eyes and ears to notice it.
Yes, to be able to stop and take notice of it.
Absolutely. And I think a really sad thing about adulthood for most people is that we try to put away the childish things and we try to be serious and only think about what's rational and sensible and right in front of us. And
Yeah.
that's incredibly sad.
It is.
And
Yeah,
what I
it
love
is.
about paganism and Druidry is that we are a little bit fringe and a bit weird.
Totally.
And it's considered
Celebrate the fact.
we celebrate the fact that we are a bit weird, and we can retain that sense of childlike wonder and adventure.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
There's a really famous phrase in the Welsh language, which is "dod yn ôl at fy nghoed," to come back to my trees, which implies coming back to a more nourishing, stable, contemplative, perhaps state of mind. You're finding your center, I guess, or finding yourself. And for me, I find that the way in which I do that in my personal practice is being out in the woods,
Yes.
in that landscape that as a child I'm convinced the reason I grew up to be the person that I am is because of the magic that I sensed in the woods. And I hope, the woods behind my grandmother's house is no longer the same kind of landscape. But it does sadden me that when I go there, I don't see children in it. I don't see children in the woods anymore.
So a few years back, I took my husband Barry back to the little village in Essex in the marshes where I grew up to see my family. And I was so excited to take him to see my magic faraway tree. So there was an old ancient willow tree that had been struck by lightning twice and survived, that all the children in the village would climb. And we'd spend summer afternoons lazing in the branches of the tree, and there was a little stream next to it. And it was the most magical place, and we all referred to it as the magic faraway tree. And I was so excited to take him to see it. And we went down to the fields, and and what we found was that the path to the magic faraway tree is overgrown now, and there are no children playing in the fields anymore.
Oh
You
no.
never ever see groups of children without any adults just hanging around, lazing the summer days away,
Yeah.
playing in the mud, climbing trees, having adventures. They're not there anymore.
I guess the world has changed quite significantly as well in the way, yes, I suppose we had to, I don't know, maybe we lived in a different age, we grew up in a different age to the one that we're currently in, where we had to, in a way, make our own entertainment. And the majority of my entertainment came from books.
Yes.
And then, of course, playing in the woods. But that sense of magic has never left me, and I'm glad that it never has. Because sometimes I think, even as a 54-year-old druid, I have to remind myself sometimes that it's important to play.
Yeah.
It's important to go back to that innocence that I felt back then. And even though we could hear kids in the background then because they're making mini marries. But even though we're here on Anglesey and you spend a lot of time here on the island, you actually live in Shropshire,
I do.
in
Yes.
the town or city?
Town.
Is it town? Of
Yeah.
Shrewsbury. Is that how it's Barry will probably criticize me for the way I've said it.
No,
Is it-
Shrewsbury's correct.
Shrewsbury's correct.
Yeah.
It's not Shrewsbury.
It's not Shrewsbury. Incomers call it Shrewsbury. The posh people, they kind of like to say they live in Shrewsbury.
So through this podcast, people will very slowly get to know the landscape of the Isle of Anglesey of Ynys Môn. But what about your landscape? How does it feel? What does it look like? How does your druidry find its expression in that particular land? Because it's a very magical landscape.
It is a very magical landscape. So Shrewsbury is in the Welsh Marches, so it's right on the border of Wales. And in fact, over the centuries, has been part of Wales on and off.
Yes, in and out, in and out.
In and out of Wales a lot. And Shrewsbury is particularly magical because it is almost an island in the River Severn. So the River Severn loops around the centre of the town and very, very almost meets itself again. So the town centre is encompassed almost entirely within the River Severn.
Right.
So the magic of that is incredible, really, that as a town, it's a very beautiful town. It's a medieval town with some amazing buildings. It's a stunning place. And I often stop when I'm just doing some shopping and see tourists taking pictures and just stop and look at what they're looking at and think, wow, I live here.
Live there.
And part of the magic of the river encompassing the town like that is we have kingfishers and otters in our town centre.
Oh, wow.
You can literally walk out of a shopping centre and 2 minutes walk and you can see a kingfisher or an otter.
Yeah.
And it has a history of gardening in Shrewsbury. So Percy Thrower was a famous television gardener who was from Shrewsbury. And so Shrewsbury, we didn't have a flower show this last year,
I
which
was
was
gonna
very
say, yeah,
sad.
the Shrewsbury Flower Show was world
Yeah, we've
renowned.
always had a flower show, and our public parks are stunning because the floral displays in them are absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
So it's a town where beauty and nature are very much woven into the centre of the town.
Yeah.
So even if you're in town, it's a wonderful, wonderful town.
But the
to be.
river.
I know.
And the thing about when you look, if you Google search on Google Maps Shrewsbury and look at the path of the river, it looks as if within like 2 weeks it would appear it's going to become an island. 'Cause
Yes.
It's so tight. That
Yes.
tiny little bit of land that's left. That surely at one point or another that will become an island.
Who knows? I mean, I think maybe they wouldn't let it now because we do
Yeah,
things like
true.
controlling the path of rivers
True,
now,
yes.
don't we? But
Yes.
and it certainly tries to become an island. It floods on a regular basis, and I kind of
Yeah.
love that the town just accepts that it floods that, you know,
part of
Sabrina or
Sabrina, yeah.
Havren, the goddess of the river, will have her flooding when she wants to.
She'll have her say.
And we just have to work around it. We
Yeah.
can only do so much to control it.
Because I have been, think I went with Barry and stuff, I think, to the park where there's that beautiful shrine
Yes.
to Sabrina as well. So that must be quite a remarkable thing to live in a place, literally, you're a stone's throw away from that genius loci, from
Absolutely.
the spirit of that place, which has not only influenced Shrewsbury, but shaped its entire history.
Amazing. And not only can we go and see her, she has a shrine and a statue in a very beautiful garden in the centre of town, but also we can go and swim in her and
Yes.
put our feet in the river and feed the ducks. And
Yeah.
that's another a thing I love to do when I just need to get out of my own head a little bit, is to just walk down to the river and go and sit on the riverbank and put my feet in the river and just be there with her.
And I think
a
that's
wonderful thing.
that's an amazing thing as well. I think about when people find their feet in Druidry is whilst we have all these amazing gods and goddesses that everybody knows, whether it's the Irish Morrigan or the Welsh Ceridwen, but within Druidry as well, there's this huge emphasis on looking at your square mile, focusing on the land, sea, and sky of where you live, and how that feeds your expression of Druidry. And it's kind of amazing that you have Sabrina just there.
We have Sabrina and so many other stories as well. Shropshire is a wonderful landscape and has its own stories and its own mythology. We have Wild Edric, so we've all heard of the Wild
Edric.
Hunt. The Wild
Oh
Hunt,
yes, yeah.
So in Shropshire, it's Wild Edric that leads the Wild Hunt.
Who's Edric?
Edric, I think and it actually was a real person called Edric at one point, but he's become part of our kind of, Welsh border mythology.
Yeah.
And he is now Wild Edric who leads the Wild Hunt.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so different areas have their own leader for that and their own person that they say. So,
So, like-
sometimes it's Odin, sometimes it's
Yes.
Gwyn ap Nudd.
Yes,
In
or
Shropshire,
Herne the
it's
Hunter,
or Herne the Hunter, and in Shropshire, it's Wild Edric.
I love that though, how locality specific, well, not where national myths can have locality specific expressions, and where they change their shape and form depending on the landscape.
Yes, and so the Wrekin, which is a big hill in the middle of Shropshire that you can see from everywhere, has its own amazing mythology about it. So it was created by a giant. 'Cause
Right.
we do live in a land of giants. There are giant stories all over the lands of Britain. And the giant that created the Wrekin, actually, he hated the people of Shrewsbury. He had a feud with the people of Shrewsbury, and he wanted to dump a load of rocks on the town and kill them all and drown them all in the river. That was his plan. So he had an apron full of rocks, and he walked. I don't know where he came from. I can't remember, but walked and walked and walked. And he asked somebody coming the other way, "Oh, how far is it to Shrewsbury?" And the person coming the other way, I think, was a Shrewsbury person. And they said, "Oh, it will take you many, many days to walk to Shrewsbury." And by this point, the giant was really tired. So he dumped all the rocks out of his apron onto the ground, and that's the Wrekin.
Yeah.
And I think he wiped some mud off his shoe as well. And that's the little hill, the Arkle, next to the Wrekin. And he went back where he came from. So,
It's crazy how many iterations of that story I've heard over the years, because we've got one here. We've got the burial chamber, Barclodiad y Gawres, which means the giantess's apronful. And it's a similar story. She was a giantess with her consort giant, and she had an apron full of rocks.
yeah, there's stories, the same stories again and again, all over the lands with just slight variants and difference in names.
And she did the same. She didn't throw her teddy out of the cot, but she threw all her rocks out of her apron and created what is now Bryn Bwca or Barclodiad y Gawres. And I love that because that tells us something about our ancestors, that we might think that, we were disparate tribes who didn't talk to one another, but when you look at stories, it tells another story.
Absolutely.
That we were talking and sharing and telling these stories in round houses and old castles and forts.
And going back far enough in our caves.
In our
Who knows?
caves,
I think
yeah.
we've always told stories, and stories have always been at the heart of what it is to be human. To be a community.
Exactly. So you and Barry, you live in Shrewsbury, and you've got 2 kids.
Yes, we have.
So that, do you know, there was, how do I say this without it sounding really shady? Maybe I should just say it. Do you remember back in the 90s where, all of the witches turning, they all came from a hereditary line of witches,
Yes, of course. Did.
And there was a secret book of shadows that just happened to have been burnt in a house fire in Rochdale in 1974, conveniently, But now we've got to this really extraordinary part of contemporary Western paganism's history where there are now children who have been born and raised into pagan households who are genuinely a part of that landscape. And that's part of your story.
Yeah.
So how did you balance, gosh, your own upbringing, your relationship with your husband, your relationship to your druidry, and then having kids? I mean, because the kids were there. I mean, I've known your 2 boys since, well, before they were born. And even when they were just born, they were there, part and parcel of our ceremonies and events.
Yeah.
How have
I
you
mean, I've
balanced
never
all
had
of
to be
that?
a mother without balancing all that, really.
Ah,
So obviously, I was part of the Anglesey Druid order from when I was pregnant with, or before I was
yes.
pregnant with
Yeah.
Gethin, and we've always just brought the kids along to whatever we're doing, and just everything we've achieved over the last 18 years, we've done it with children in tow,
Yes.
which is amazing, really. And poor things, they seem to have survived quite well. And I suppose, I mean, kids do tend to rebel at some point. So Gethin, my oldest, I mean, he's still very supportive. He'll come along and do some filming or take some pictures or help us at
Well,
events. But
yes.
he doesn't consider himself a pagan.
No,
He's an atheist. He just doesn't really, not his thing.
And he's what, 17? He's
17, he'll be
now?
18 soon, yeah.
Yeah.
But he's still grown up within this community and is a part of this community.
Yes.
Gwydion, the youngest, is a druid through and through. He
Yes.
embraces and absolutely adores everything about the druidry, which I love, So
Yeah. Yeah.
he's a very magical little boy, bless him.
He
Not
is
very
very-
little anymore, huge actually. So he's
Yeah, they've
much
grown
much
so-
taller than
grown
me
so
now.
much.
But
But even, like you said with your eldest, I can see, and even in the conversations that I have with him, however brief sometimes, that he has an admiration and a respect
yes,
as a young adult for the things that his parents and his aunties get up to,
yes, he does, which is lovely.
which is quite lovely because Barry and Kristal's kids always referred to myself and my husband Ian as Uncle Chris and Auntie Chris and Uncle Ian.
Yes.
And I still feel quite touched when even Gethin at 17 years old, a young adult man now, calls me Auntie Chris.
Yeah, he's a lovely lad actually, and he's still he still insists on telling me he loves me in front of all his friends. When he says, he's like, "Bye, mum, love you," and he's still he still hugs and kisses everybody. And you're always going to be Auntie Chris.
Yeah.
What's lovely is he tells his friends and people at college about his Auntie Chris. So he's studying criminology and psychology at the moment at A level, and so he's told his entire criminology class about your career in mortuaries and all the stories that you've told, and he always talks about you as Auntie Chris.
That's so sweet.
I think anyone ever questions.
That is
that.
so sweet. But they obviously had exposure to all other religious paths and spiritualities.
Absolutely, yes.
But
Yeah.
it's not as if you said this is what you have to be.
Oh, never.
That's what we had as kids.
Yeah,
It was only the one
we
option.
never had any choice or option really as young children. It just wasn't a thing, and I very much didn't want them being taught any one religion or path as reality. If nothing else, this is only my perception of the world. That doesn't mean it's right.
Yeah.
I can never get over how anyone has the arrogance to go around telling everybody that the world is a certain way and they must believe the same.
This is the one true way.
No, and in fact, it was interesting. I very deliberately, when they were small children, didn't teach them any kind of religion. Obviously, they came along to all of our things, but I never told them that they should believe anything. And I very much didn't want to. I'm like, how can children have a religion? They don't know who they are yet. How can they possibly have a religion? And then when they went to school, which was of course a Church of England school, because we don't really have any choice, that's our local school, unless I wanted to pay a lot of money for private schooling or homeschool, which wasn't an option for us at the time. It's Church of England or nothing. Suddenly, I mean, the school was lovely, but they were very much teaching Christianity as fact.
Right.
And this is the way the world is. So I had to go to some lengths to counteract that.
Yeah.
I remember Gethin when he was about 5 or 6. He came home saying that his teacher had taught him that, God made the world and God made all the animals. And he was a little bit affronted because he had just learned about evolution and he was into dinosaurs and he was, very confused. So we bunked off school for the day and we went to London on the train and we went to the Natural History Museum and we looked at fossils and we looked at dinosaurs and we looked at the evolution and the theory of evolution and we learned all about it. And then I bought a book on different world mythologies and creation myths, and we did some reading about how different groups of people around the world thought about creation, just
Yeah.
to try and get some balance in there.
And moderate it a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yes, I found quite quickly I was almost pushed into a position of having to introduce a little bit of our beliefs into their life. Otherwise, it would be overwhelmingly overshadowed by the Christian beliefs.
Yeah. But they've grown up rather wonderfully.
They have, yeah. I mean, Gethin's very much a scientist in the way he thinks about the world, which is wonderful. But I like to think he still has a bit of a sense of wonder and magic, even if, he doesn't.
I would imagine, knowing the household he lives in.
Yeah.
I would imagine so.
Hopefully. And I mean, and Gwydion he's a very clever little boy. He's very into his science as well, but he's an out and out pagan and druid, and I love that.
Yes, and he's here with us this weekend.
Yes, he is.
For the Marry Lwyd event.
Yes.
Which is peculiar, isn't it? Because we've been, oh my word, the first time we went to the Chepstow, was it the Chepstow Marry Lwyd and Wassail event? But that's several years ago now.
Was it 2014 when we first?
2014.
Something like that.
When we first had a Marry, or when we first went to Chepstow.
Oh no, when we first had Marry, I think that's when Marry was.
Yes. And I was quite dumbstruck and overjoyed when that first time we went down to Chepstow, that there were so many people there. And at the heart of it was the Marry Lwyd, who, of course, having been brought up in Wales, I'm familiar with the Marry Lwyd, but I'd never seen her in this locale. And I think from whenever, I can't quite recall when the Chepstow Marry Lwyd and Wassail actually started, but we went on several years ago. And then we ended up, thanks to Barry, getting our own Marry Lwyd for the Anglesey Druid order. And she seems to have had a massive resurgence in the last, not even, 10 years? Something like that. And I'm not sure what drives that. What do you think? What is it that's compelling about that figure to so many people?
I think because she transcends any belief system or religion, she just is a magical being. She's clearly otherworldly. She's in this world, but not of this world.
Yeah.
And she kind of encompasses life and death. She's a skeleton. She's a skeletal horse, and yet she's knocking on doors and asking for beer and money, and she's singing songs, and she has a sense of joy about her. She's joyous and she's fun and she's naughty, but at the same time she's majestic and a little bit scary to people who haven't grown up with that belief. She's a deathly skeletal horse. She's kind of a winter Christmas zombie death horse to somebody who comes out of this tradition and just sees her. It's like, what is that? So she kind of encompasses everything. She's an incredibly compelling figure.
Because she's dead.
Yes.
But she's alive.
Yes.
She's alive, but she's also dead.
Yes.
She's not the living dead, and she's not the undead.
No.
She's like something else entirely. This remarkable figure, and I don't know how you feel about it, but whenever Barry, your husband, or I should say actually to everybody who's listening and watching, that Barry and Kristal are the guardians of Marry Lwyd Morn. She lives with you.
She does.
She lives and is cared for by you and your family. But whenever Barry the Marry. It's so tonight when we're celebrating Old New Year here in Galan and the Marry is there carousing around the town. It's really weird, but there's points in the evening where I will stop and think, where's Barry?
Yeah.
Because Barry disappears. Like entirely. It's as if he's consumed
Yeah.
by this other persona, and he vanishes.
Yeah.
And then at some point towards the witching hour, collapses out of the shroud, having had so much beer in all of the pubs in Beaumaris, which is crazy. So how did, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's as if he vanishes into a mystery.
And he does. And that is the wonder and the mystery of Mary, is that she is real. She is real and alive and has her own personality, and alive and dead. And um, as her, it's an interesting thing how people refer to the person who is underneath the shroud and operates the Mary. Some people call them the rider. Well, it's rather the other way round.
Yeah.
It's
Very much the other
it's
way around.
mostly not Barry that's in control there. It's like, so I think as pagans, it comes quite naturally to us to understand that other beings, other worldly beings, gods, spirits, don't have a corporeal form. So we are quite used to the concept of embodying them in ritual, and that sometimes they need us
Yes.
to be able to act in the
Like
current
aspecting.
world.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's no different with Mary. So to operate Mary Lwyd is to very much allow her to take over,
Yeah.
to be the one who's directing operations at that time.
Yes.
And
And she's there in the physical form though as well. That's the remarkable thing.
yes,
You know, when we're working with deities, with gods and goddesses or the spirits of the place, it's unusual for them to have an actual physical form. They may have something in the landscape like a river or a hill, but it's very different with the Mary, isn't it? And that's not to say that the Mary is a deity to everybody who has a Mary. She isn't to so many. She's just a folk figure. But to us as Druids, she certainly, I consider her to be an aspect of the sovereignty deities of winter. And it is quite unusual for those deities that we work with as pagans to have such a physical form as the Mary Lwyd. That is so striking. And also so much taller than the operator, and swallows the operator up entirely.
and I think sometimes people don't appreciate that when Barry is underneath that shroud, not only is he not really fully in control because he is allowing Mary to take over,
Yeah.
he physically cannot see what he's doing. So sometimes Mary gets up to things which surprise Barry, quite honestly. He has a very, very limited field of vision, and he can't sense or feel what Mary is touching. He
No.
can't see what Mary is seeing.
It's a very
So
liminal space,
it's
really.
a very liminal space to be, yeah.
And he always recounts of how peculiar an experience it is, that it is a magical experience to be in that position of even operating the Mary sounds a bit too technical.
Yes, it's difficult to come up with terminology that really kind of encompasses what that role is.
Yeah, very peculiar. So tell us a number of questions, I suppose, all into one.
Yeah.
How did we find Mary Lwyd Morn? Where did she come from? And what's it like being the guardians for her? What did you have to prepare? What do you do? How does she come into your lives at the beginning of winter? How does she then go to sleep at the end of winter, which is like now?
Okay.
All of that.
So all of that, okay. So we've been talking for a while as an order and a group of friends about wanting a Mary Lwyd. And I know we'd sort of, did we go to Chepstow before we had Mary?
Yes.
We did, didn't we?
Yeah.
And we were really inspired, and it had been something that we'd been floating for a while, and we were just keeping an eye out for a horse skull. And actually horse skulls are really hard to come by. Or rather, you can buy them, but then they tend to be horses that have been slaughtered for meat. They've come from an abattoir and they've got a bolt hole, and the whole thing's a bit icky, really, and sounded quite a traumatic thing. So we learned a lot about the Mary and the tradition of the Mary before we eventually found our Mary skull. And we knew that, while Mary is apparently a South Walian tradition, we knew that actually the earliest mention of a Mary Lwyd was, of course, in North Wales. So we
by Ruthin.
very much wanted to bring bring Mary back to North Wales and to Anglesey in particular, and that was our goal, really, was to do that. And we knew as a pagan tradition kind of what Mary would represent and would be. So we eventually found a horse's skull on eBay that wasn't a newly slaughtered horse, and one of our members got in contact and arranged to buy. And we didn't even realize the story until we'd already kind of bought this skull, but she was an antique. She was a moor pony, whether Dartmoor, Exmoor, Welsh Mountain, we're not sure, but a wild moor pony. And you can see it if you see pictures of Mary or videos of Mary. She's quite small and she has a beautiful, really beautiful, delicate bone structure. She's a wild type pony who lived wild and died of natural causes. She was a reasonably young, looking at her and her teeth, she wasn't an elderly pony, so I don't know what had happened, but she died reasonably young. But the skull itself is at least 50 years old. And it was an equine artist that owned the skull, and she resided in the studio as a model for years and years and years. And eventually, the equine artist died, and the effects were sold off on eBay, and that's how we found Mary. So I love that. There's no trauma to her history.
Yeah.
She's an antique. She died a long time ago, and she was loved in her previous life. So she's had 3 lives, really. She lived as a living pony on the moors, and then she lived as a model for an artist, and now she's living again as our Mary Lwyd. And very much the sense that we had from the skull when we first brought Mary home is just, that, yeah, she was up for it.
Yeah, definitely up for it.
Do you want to be a Mary Lwyd? Hell yes, I want to be a Mary Lwyd, and the sense of joy and just, yes, this is what I want. And it's important to us that it's not something we imposed on the skull of an animal that had died, that, she was from the beginning part of that process. So we became her guardian simply because Barry is an engineer and he's very handy at making things and working out how things work and function. And so he was the one who took on the task of turning this skull into a working, moving Mary Lwyd.
That's quite a complicated process.
It is. It's quite technical, to be fair. And as an antique skull as well, she needs a little bit of care. She has some teeth missing, so he made her some resin teeth to fill the gaps and made sure that any cracks and joins were strengthened. And he does that every year. He sort of, just goes over the skull and makes sure it strengthens and makes sure,
because there's quite a lot of clacking involved.
There's a lot of clacking involved, yeah, absolutely. And we don't want bits falling off everywhere,
No,
So
she's quite robust, thanks to Barry.
yes. So as Barry was the one who made her and developed that relationship with her, it kind of naturally fell into that he was the one to build that strong enough relationship to be the one under the shroud. And it's always a man. And I think it's a really interesting fact for people to know that it should never be a woman under the shroud, because Mary is so imminent and so present. I think the idea is that a woman would be too much of a strong connection and she might never leave.
She'd never leave.
She'd never leave. She'd be like, oh, I've got a pair of tits. Amazing. I'm going to stay forever. And it would be permanent winter. It'd be like Narnia. And that would be it. So it's really important that it's a man and not a woman, so that there's enough of difference for her not to want to stay permanently.
Yes. So and there's a slight kink in the armour.
Being married to Mary Lwyd permanently would be a little bit overwhelming.
That would be very overwhelming.
So I'm very glad that she does consent to leave.
Yes. But it's not even as simple as she doesn't just live in a closet. She has a coffin.
Oh yes, so Mary, she's dead in the summer. At the end of January, she dies, and we put her to rest in her coffin. She's got a wooden coffin with a lid, and it's shut, and she's dead all summer.
Barry's made that as well.
Barry's made the coffin to fit the skull as well, and it's all lined with foam that's cut out to the shape. It's really lovely.
The shrouds all get a wash and
everything gets put away, and then she's awoken at Galan, and we do that ceremonially. We do now live stream it because that's life after COVID. Everything's live streamed, but
techno druidry.
And we wake her with song, with poetry, and our community all takes part, and we wake her up at Galan, and then she is awake all winter long. Now she's awake and she lives in our house. So no, we don't ever put her in a cupboard somewhere. No. So when we're not prancing around and doing Mary things, she's on our mantelpiece, and we make a beautiful display, and she has some pretty star fairy lights and a little lantern with stars in. So she's a centerpiece in our home, and we always say hello to her and we talk to her, so we include her in conversations, and if we want to watch some telly, we put her eyes on so she can see.
Yeah,
'cause
yeah.
that would be
So
very
she can
rude not
watch.
to. So
Yes, that would.
if we're at home, we always put her eyes on so she can see what's happening. She's
Yeah.
got light up eyes for anyone who's not seen her before. So, um, and we kiss her goodnight when we go to bed, and we turn her eyes off so she can sleep. So she's very much a part of our family
Yeah.
on a daily basis throughout the winter.
And has that, it's been over 10 years now, hasn't it?
Mm.
And that must be quite a unique thing. I don't know what that feels like to have such a powerful and evocative spirit
Mm.
that is a living part of your home. Because obviously we get to see her when she's here, when she comes to Bryn Celli, when she comes to Galan, winter solstice or whatever is happening. But you get to share your home with that spirit all winter long.
Yeah.
That's quite
It's
remarkable.
quite unique. I'm so very
It's very
many
unique.
people who have it, and I know, see, different Maori troops are very different with their Maoris. Now we know certainly one other very pagan Mary Lwyd Larcher,
Mary Lwyd
but we
Larcher,
learned a lot from
yes.
Phil Larcher.
With the spirals. on them,
Oh
they're
my God,
gorgeous.
beautiful Mary, and Phil's an amazing guy. You know, they're lovely people, and they're very pagan, and they're married very similarly to ours.
Yes, yes,
She's a very powerful being and spirit in her own right. So
yes.
I think there's only one other person I know of who has that very similar relationship with their Maori. Most Maoris are respected and loved, but
Oh gosh, yes.
very much so,
Mm.
but maybe aren't quite, I don't know how to word it really. They're just not quite considered as a
Spirit.
deity, spirit,
Yes.
such a powerful spirit in their own right.
Folkloric figure.
Yes, so
maybe.
some are more
Yes.
some are more sort of humble and more jolly and more sort of nice, jolly
Yes.
folkloric figures, and they make some people keep their marries out all year round, which I think is weird and wonderful because it would be Narnia. Like I really feel like
yes.
we have to let the spring come. Mary has to go and
yeah.
die so that that can happen.
And as a Welsh person, I am a little bit freaked out by that.
Yeah.
I'm like, I did come across a whole, and it was a herd of Mary Lwyds at the National Eisteddfod, and I froze because that's August.
Oh,
I'm like, oh no, what's happening?
yeah.
What's going on? She's very much a winter.
Yes, and a very
Very much.
powerful one. And part of me genuinely believes that spring would never come if she didn't go back into her
Yes.
coffin.
Yes.
And I would feel very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
We've had people ask us to take Mary to events in February and March, and I'm like, I'm very sorry, but no, she's dead at that
She's
point.
dead.
She's dead. She
Yeah,
can't-
and that is the right word as well.
yeah, she's
It's
dead.
the
She's
correct
not
word.
asleep.
She's dead. She's not
dead.
sleeping.
No.
She's quite dead in her
She is
coffin.
indeed.
And there's an interesting dichotomy actually, because when it comes to the Mary Lwyd being a folkloric figure and very much loved in so many parts of Wales, especially with the resurgence in the interest of the Mary Lwyd, but there's also a little quandary involved in that, because what's happened is that we're not the only people within contemporary paganism who have adopted the Mary Lwyd, and to us she very much is an aspect of deity. But I think we're also very clear that that's just our opinion.
Yes,
And
very
that's
much
a
so.
working practice within the Anglesey Druid order. And that's not to say that every other Mary Lwyd has the same meaning to other people.
Absolutely. Yes.
And
very important to.
but it's fascinating how she appeals to people who have an interest in folk traditions, in folk music, folk songs, poetry, but also to pagans who also love those things. But then there's this other edge to her that brings her into the, I guess, through processes of apotheosis, to becoming an inspirited being.
Yeah, it's very interesting, the history of the Mary Lwyd. And I think we have to be very careful. And I see some kind of blog posts and things which state that, you know, she is a continuation of an ancient tradition. And we have to be very, very,
Very
precise
careful,
and
yeah.
careful, because, of course, the first mention of Mary Lwyd existing was in 1800.
Yeah.
There is no record of Mary Lwyd tradition in Wales throughout the medieval period.
No.
No. So we cannot state that she is an ancient tradition. However, her roots definitely harken back to some very ancient and pagan and pre-Christian traditions, like all over Northern Europe. There are masked beasts, and sometimes they are horses, sometimes they're goats, sometimes they're deer, but they definitely harken back to pre-Christian
Yes.
traditions.
And they've
However,
evolved.
and they have
Yeah.
evolved over time and are still evolving today. So we have to be very careful not to claim that Mari Lwyd tradition in Wales is ancient and pre-Christian, because of course in 1800 those villagers, you know, going house to house with their Mari Lwyd would not have considered themselves pagan, would have been horrified. They'd have been
Gosh, yeah.
staunch chapel goers.
So mortified.
Absolutely mortified, you know. So we have to be careful in what claims we make.
Yeah, very careful. And I think the common ground, or the safest ground, is that she's a folkloric figure
Yes,
that has
very much.
undergone huge transformative processes herself over particularly the last few decades as well, which I think is very telling, that it appeals to a thirst that people have for what is singing from this land. You know, and she also doesn't exist in isolation, does she? Because you've got the Mabry Dún, you've got the Udnan Ors, you've got the Obi Ors.
Yes.
You have all of these other figures, and whilst, you know, we could say and maybe possibly argue that the Mari Lwyd as an icon, as an image, as a folkloric figure, possibly is inspired by the horse cults of the ancient Celts.
Yeah.
You know, how horses have spoken to the people of Britain for countless centuries, but that it's also flavored by locality specific customs. But I think what I've also found as well, and we've received criticism as well within the Anglesey Druid order, that we shouldn't have a Mari Lwyd, that we don't have a right to have a Mari Lwyd, which of course I'm not having any of that. You know, I immediately get on my soapbox and go, hold on a second, she's a folkloric figure, she belongs to the folk. And I am one of the folk, you know, we are the folk, we are the people. And I think when people start to try and police a folk figure like that, or to gatekeep it, I think that's also quite dangerous ground. You know, how it can go in two ways, can it? Making false claims that this is an ancient, unbroken tradition going back 2,000 years, which we know have no evidence to say so. But there's also, I think, the danger that it's gate kept, and that we don't have a right to gatekeep her. Just guesses why we're here, sharing her with all of Beaumaris this evening. And but she's a remarkable figure, and I still haven't quite got to the bottom of how she has become so popular in recent decades. I mean, there's kids at the moment making little mini Mari Lwyds, and they seem to love her. And then last year, of course, there was that peculiar encounter that Barry had with an elderly lady in Beaumaris, which was really touching.
That was very special. So, yeah, we were late into the evening last year when we'd been through several different pubs on our Mari pub crawl, our very folkloric pub crawl, obviously.
Yes, tradition.
It's the one night of the year where you'll see my husband very drunk, because as Mari, everybody wants to give Mari free beer, so they're just lined up all the time. And we were in the Bold Arms, and he disappeared.
He vanished.
Everyone started saying, "Oh, where's Barry? Where's Mari? Where have they gone?" And we hadn't seen him for almost an hour, I think. And I was actually starting to get a bit worried. I was thinking, well, you know, he's had a few drinks. I don't know where he's gone. And he eventually reappeared. And it turns out that there was a very elderly lady living very nearby the pub who was bedridden and wasn't unable to leave her house. And she had memories of Mari Lwyd when she was a child. And she was desperate to see Mari again. So Mary and Barry went to visit her and knock on her door and visit her in her home, and she was incredibly touched.
Yeah.
I think she cried, and it was just a really special moment. And something like that just makes everything worthwhile.
So worthwhile.
But it just meant so much to that one very elderly lady.
Yeah.
You know, Mary went to her home and visited her.
Which is remarkable, and probably something that could only ever happen in Wales,
Yes.
where an elderly person who is bedridden is visited by basically a zombie horse and doesn't freak the hell out,
No.
but rather embraces it entirely with like, oh my word, it's Mary, with such glee and such joy.
Yeah.
And I love that it's that it's become a loved part of our practice. And I guess that shows that Druidry in itself is an evolving practice, just the same as the Mari Lwyd is an evolving practice.
Yeah.
You know, which is rather lovely, I think.
Yeah, I think it's interesting also that Mary Lou's are spreading not even just within Britain, but overseas. There are in
Overseas.
America, you've seen some Marys over there, haven't you?
Yes, yeah, and down in Australia as well, which was peculiar because I met a Mary Lwyd troupe when I was down in South Australia. And I'm like, it's May. Oh, hold on. No, it's not May. It's
Yes.
our October. What's that really messed with my head because we'd got down and we were celebrating Samhain in
Yes.
South Australia with the Druids of South Australia. So it never dawned on me that the Mary Lwyd would come out. And of course you would. And this was the 31st of April. So my little Welsh brain was freaking out, thinking, why is Mary awake this May? But of course it isn't in the
I
Southern
think
Hemisphere.
it's hard, isn't it, to kind of get our head around. And I honestly think, like, I have colleagues who are working in the NHS who go to work in Australia or New Zealand, and I'm like, I mean, I'm sure they're beautiful places with wonderful people, but I don't think my little mind could cope with the secular calendar
Yeah,
being different from the seasons, because we
yes,
are very lucky as pagans living in the Northern Hemisphere. The secular celebrations of Halloween and Christmas coincide with our seasonal celebrations very beautifully. And
yeah.
I don't think I could cope with celebrating Christmas in the summer and, you
Summer
know,
solstice in the
Halloween
winter.
in the spring,
Yes, yeah. It's
but
very
Calendaring
peculiar.
no,
Yeah, it is
yeah,
very peculiar. And I think it's probably quite a, because I know several people, I've got lovely friends down in Australia, and I've had so many of those conversations with them as well, particularly when the Mary Lwyd came into the picture. I'm like, that's the Mary Lwyd, it's May. And they were like, it's only May by name.
yes,
It's actually
yes,
the beginning of winter. Like, oh, of course it is. And I think for them, it's been a process,
yeah,
and a hard process to be able to, right, how does this very new, this Wheel of the Year thing is very new within a contemporary pagan perspective, even though some of those states are obviously very ancient, how we've created this eight-spoke wheel is fairly new. And I think they're getting used to working that into their practice. But yeah, seeing the Mary all over the world is something that I never expected to see.
do you find it quite moving?
I do find it quite moving, but um, I think there's a fine line as well, without sounding like a shady bitch, that there is a fine line because she is a folkloric practice, and there are elements of that folkloric practice which I feel as a Welsh person that do need to be honoured and do need to be maintained. So we go to length to make sure that the punkor,
Mhm.
so the punkor is a chant. A chant, would that be the right chant? It's a chant, isn't it? Sounds like
Song.
a chant, a song, a bardic riddle
Hmm.
that is sung. And for me, as a native Welsh person, I think it's important that because the punkor element is so intimately tied into the Mary Lwyd tradition, that I think that element should be honoured.
Yeah.
So the troops that I know, particularly in the United States of America, I said to them, if you have questions, just ask the Welsh people. We'll sing the punkor into a Facebook Messenger voice function so that you can hear it. And I've found it really touching actually, particularly this current winter, of seeing some of the troops from pagans that I know in the United States who are doing just that. And they've done their best to learn the punkor, and then they'll sing them in Welsh and in English, and I find that very touching. But I also think the fact that she has gone global is saying something about the needs of people. I'm not quite sure what it's saying, but I think it's trying to tell us something about that, because she's not just because she's real. And I think unless you've met the Mary, that's probably a very queer statement to hear,
Yeah.
that she's real. But she seems very real to me. And in my practice as a druid, she appears real to me as a goddess of winter, almost as an iteration of Rhiannon, the sovereignty figure of the land in her winter guise.
I I think, yeah, it sits a little bit differently, maybe, because we do consider her to be a deity and a very powerful figure and spirit. If you see people sort of making light or making her be just a figure of fun, or just kind of missing some of that, it's very different, isn't it? And I think there's something peculiar to Britain, and you've touched on this, that we have a horse culture here
Yeah.
going back thousands of years, and it's very specific to Britain. So we know that the ancient Celts considered horses to be very special, and there were particular laws all about horses.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
worst way to insult somebody would be to belittle, steal, or deface their horses in some way, but even sort of pre-Celtic, there's something that's very specific about Britain, and only Britain and Ireland, where horses are considered sacred. And um, in the same way that, every other country around the world will happily eat horse meat, but British people really don't like to. The Finder's crispy pancake thing,
Oh my word, the scandal.
that they were contaminated with horse meat, and I think, other European countries looked at us and were like,
What are you on about?
what are you on? Yeah, because to us that it's such a taboo thing to eat horses, because horses they're not food.
No,
We
there's
still,
something else.
and this goes back thousands of years. It's something that's
Yeah.
buried so deep within our DNA and our sort of collective memory, that horses are just really special.
Yeah.
And the reason that we have, horses carved into our hillsides, and
Yes.
that no other country has such a very special and close relationship with horses,
Yeah.
and not just physical horses, but the idea of horses, the spirit of horses.
And it's almost something that people find very difficult to articulate as well. Like you mentioned, the Finder's crispy pancake scandal, which was, for those of you who don't know, this was several years ago, wasn't it? Like 10 years ago. Accidentally, horse meat found its way into this, what would you call it? Like a processed,
Junk
ready
food, really, just minced beef, kind of wrapped in a pancake with breadcrumbs.
pancake, yes.
Just
And people found out that horse meat had entered the food chain, and all hell let loose.
Oh yeah.
And I remember having this conversation with my mum. She was incensed. She was outraged at this peculiarity. I'm like, so why are you so upset? And she said, we don't eat horses. And I said, why do we not eat horses, Mum? Well, we don't. Because and you're right. I think it's because it's so deep in our cultural consciousness that the majority of people, I think, were absolutely outraged, but didn't necessarily know how to articulate why.
And it's not even something as simple as people are fond of horses or keep them as pets, because people will eat rabbit.
Yes.
That.
Yeah. Very
I mean,
much so.
we don't eat cats and dogs. I think we all don't like that. But we'll eat all sorts of animals that we might, be affectionate with, or keep as pets, and don't think anything of it. But horses,
No,
absolutely not.
it's fascinating, and I think that we see that in that expression of Mary Lwyd. She's just there, and she's a part of that story.
She calls to something that's so deep within our psyche that we can't even articulate it.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's hard to talk about, because we can't quite put into words why we love her so much, or we're so drawn to her, but we are.
Yeah, totally. And on that note, we've got a Mary Lwyd to get ready.
We have, yeah.
We have. So I'd like to say thank you so much for all the work that you've done tirelessly over the last 20 odd years for the Anglesey Druid Order. It wouldn't be what it is without you. Thank you very much. And for being our Mary guardians, you and Barry and Gethin and Gwydion. It's fabulous. So thank you very much for coming and having a chat.
Thank you.
It's been really nice. And thank you all for watching and for listening. You can find further information about the Anglesey Druid Order by going to our website, which is angleseydruidorder.co.uk, for information on our courses, rituals and community. So thank you so much for listening. Diolch i chi gyd am wrando ac am wylio. Mi welwn i chi tro nesa. We shall see you again in February. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.